Hey, welcome to the ABC podcast. So glad that you are tuning in. We are continuing to review our sermons. And so what we're doing today is we're going to talk about our latest sermon, Nehemiah chapter 2, 17 and 18. And I'm really grateful to have one of my good friends here with me today, Brother Joel Andrews. So Joel, tell us about you, your family, and Joel actually serves here at ABC. So tell us what you do here at Apex Baptist.
Sure, it's good to be on. So I have the privilege to work part-time with the church. I'm a part of the creative team ministry, specifically doing video projects. So anything from documenting cool events like baptisms at Jordan Lake or announcement videos to help our church get plugged in and aware of what's going on. Really just so thankful to be a part of the church in that regard. We started coming here just before you showed up on the scene, actually. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that later on. But just really thankful for how we got plugged in small to start out, and just again thankful to be a part of on staff, really just serving how I think God has gifted me, and being able to serve in that regard has brought me a lot of joy.
It's amazing, man. It's amazing. And you crushed the videos, by the way, the baptism video. I think it was this past Sunday it played. And man, everything you put out is just incredible. So I appreciate all your work there.
It's hard to mess that up. Again, I'm just thankful to be able to document what God is doing, and it's hard to mess that one up when God gives us such a good day for it, and people are out, and
it's awesome. So tell us about your family.
Yeah, so I have 3 kids. I tell people that I married way up.
Yes, you did. I agree.
My wife is only 5 foot tall, but I married sky high.
Yes, we all did, man.
So she is a homeschool mom, so that's very much a part of our life. Raising these 3 kids, we're loving life in Holly Springs, but like I said, we got connected with Apex Baptist, and we love being plugged in here and love the people here. So I do some video stuff full time and video stuff for the church. But really life is the kids right now. So youngest is 5, middle child is 9, and oldest is 11. So
busy.
That's our life. Yeah, busy, but God's given us grace. We're protective of our time because we know just how precious it is, the time with our kids right now.
That's wise, man. It's very wise. It's hard sometimes to remember that. And the time ticks by before you know it. Your kids are grown. They're out of your house, and you can't get that time back, right? So the wisdom behind protecting that is huge, man. I'm really proud of you for doing that. We're glad to have your family here at Apex. We're glad to have you on staff, and man, it's just been really, really a joy to get to know you. We'll talk a little bit about that as we walk through the sermon today. But I have some really important questions before we dive into the sermon. You're not prepared for these. Are you ready?
I guess so.
Okay. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Oh, man. That's really on the spot. We've revisited this with the boys getting into Star Wars. I might have to say Star Wars.
Maybe, Star Wars.
Return of the Jedi.
Okay. Gotcha. So I've never seen any Star Wars movie, never seen a Marvel movie, any of it. Okay. So when you and Sean talk about these things, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just nod my head. All right, cool. All right, so here, how about this one? Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay.
Yeah, hands down.
I think when people ask that question, they're asking coffee, normal coffee, and then tea that you heat up tea, right? Like hot tea.
Yeah, I've had some good tea, but I remember the first time someone gave me a French press coffee, and it was the first time I tried coffee without any cream and sugar, and it tasted so good.
Really?
And so I'm a bit of a coffee snob, but at the same time, if I'm on a road trip, stop at a gas station, get me some black coffee, I'm good to go. So I do appreciate the tea time.
Yeah.
Usually the snacks around it. I'm a coffee guy.
I don't know if I've ever had tea. When, again, this question's asked, I think it's the assumption's the hot tea. But I would answer that question, sweet tea all day.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
okay.
Give me a Chick-fil-A sweet tea. But
you're a Florida boy. You're definitely
come on,
sweet
somebody.
Tea.
That's right. It tastes like syrup. All right. So, favorite hobby? Do you have a favorite hobby?
I do really love being behind the camera. I think as a profession, it works out that I do video stuff because I've always loved documenting things, having a camera in the hand. And one thing that we like to do as a family is make these short little 1 and 2 minute recap videos every now and then. And it's such a joy to play back and watch with the kids. And, it's a balance trying to be in the moment, but also documenting fun things to look back on. But so I'd say definitely being behind the camera, either stills or with video.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I also know you like to run. Is that correct? Or you do run. Maybe you don't like to run.
I go through peaks and valleys now that I'm in my 40s. But yeah, running has always been a thing, a healthy discipline in my life that I enjoy. I enjoy you don't think of it as a team sport, but I do like running with other men and challenging each other.
Nice.
In that and building relationships that way too. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. All right. Last question in this realm of things. So favorite food. What about that?
Favorite food. So it's hard not to go with pizza. We have a Friday tradition where my wife makes homemade sourdough crust pizza.
Wow.
And it is bomb.
That sounds amazing.
So that's a Friday movie night with the family, pizza, and we'll even do some ice cream afterwards. So it's
that's every Friday?
Every Friday.
Let's go. Man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that tradition. You need to hang on to that. All right, dude. Well, again, this past Sunday, we've just kind of been walking through Nehemiah. We're not going verse by verse, which is not typically what we do. We just planned a couple of sermon series this fall since we were on a 2-year run with the book of Romans. And so we've just kind of flown through Nehemiah, just kind of getting a 10,000-foot view. And we're going to jump into the life of Joseph next until Christmas time. And then we'll be in a book in January, just walking through it verse by verse. But man, this Nehemiah series has been timely. It's been fun just to kind of read through the book again. And one of the things we've challenged our people to do is just read the book of Nehemiah. I think you gain so much just by reading the book. And so we've preached a few sermons around it. And this past Sunday, we talked about Nehemiah chapter 2, 17 and 18 is where we focused. We really looked at a lot of different text, even jumping to chapter 4 and chapter 8 and some of the beginnings of chapter 2. One of the things that we focused on is how Nehemiah was a motivator. Mm-hmm. He was someone who had the ability from the Lord to, stir the affections of the people around him and say, hey, let's link arms and do this together. And this that they were doing, as we know, as the city was in ruins, the wall was nothing but rubble. Even though for years they'd attempted to rebuild, they just were not able to do it. The temple had been rebuilt, but all in all, man, the city was not to the place that it needed to be. And it grieved Nehemiah. God purposed in his heart to lead the charge in rebuilding the wall so that they were no longer, as the word says, in derision, being made fun of and all the things. So he did this, and he was faithful in doing this. And I think he used a ton of wisdom in his approach. And we learn, a lot of leadership principles from the book of Nehemiah. We also learned the importance of character and integrity and applying wisdom to every situation. He had a lot of people coming against him, and instead of just broadcasting what God had done, he very noiselessly examined the walls. He was taking inventory. Where are we? What does it look like? What are the needs? He did this with great wisdom before he went and led the charge to rebuild. So a couple of things that we distilled through this message is one, we were reminded that Nehemiah was just a layperson, right? He was not a priest. He was not a prophet. He was just the everyday common man. And I made a point Sunday to say, and Joe, I want to know your thoughts on this, to say that God uses all manner of people in all manner of places to do all manner of work. Have you found this to be true in your life?
It's such a good word, and timely is a good way to describe us coming into this book during this time dealing with the destruction of this latest hurricane.
Yeah.
Specifically like in our home state. But yeah, this is challenging for sure, but God uses the ordinary time and time again. We see that through the Old Testament, these characters that are used by God despite their flaws. Mm-hmm. And I look around Apex Baptist, and for someone like myself that is fairly introverted, and I tend to gravitate towards people that are highly motivating in that they have a stronger personality. They're more vocal with their things, vocal with their ideas and thoughts and how they lead. So I kind of gravitate towards those people. And so you see people in the church gifted in different areas. I think Nehemiah is a good example of someone that maybe wasn't as gifted in the traditional skills and personality traits that you would see in a leader, but definitely just because of the burden that he had, was able to do remarkable things.
Yeah, man, I love that. And even like looking at verse 17, this is when he says, hey, it's time to rise up. Let us rise up. I mean, the people responded that way. Let us rise up. They were so motivated by what God had purposed in Nehemiah's heart. And it says that the Lord strengthened their hands to do the work that God had in front of them. And you mentioned the hurricane, man, and it's just a great example. You know, I've been so blessed by watching our church people, watching our community, watching people throughout the state and really beyond the state who have said, hey, we want to make a difference. God's purposed in my heart to do something to make a change here, to help those that are in need. And that has been really cool. And just a great reminder of this message. You know, Sunday morning, Joel, you know, we asked our church, said, hey, just bring a pack of water. We had members gathering this past Sunday, which happens once a year. We typically do nothing on Sunday night. And we were like, hey, come back tonight, bring a case of water if you can. If you can, that'd be great. We'll find a way to get it to West Carolina. You know, there's help that's needed there. And as you know, man, I think you were actually documenting this. I'm certain you were. Our Main Street area, which is kind of like our hangout spot, full of water. I mean, just everywhere. We've already sent 3 trailers, which, Joel, you and I were able to go to Hendersonville. But what are some of your thoughts from that trip?
Yeah, I think when you see something like a natural disaster and start to feel so just burdened by the physical need, you look for tangible ways to get involved. And what started as a simple, tangible, the water, right? Knowing that for weeks, people are going to be struggling to find clean drinking water. That was what we decided to focus on, and people responded. And I think that shows that people have this burden, and it only takes a little bit of the motivation to really inspire a big group of people. And I know a lot of people have family that live out west, but even for those that don't, God puts that on our heart. And I think it's cool to see churches step up, but you see God work and supply common grace throughout the country in times like this. And, you know, if anything positive comes out of this hurricane, it does seem like a timely thing for the country, you know, to get behind supplying maybe like a physical need and maybe put some stuff to the side and unify together. And I again, just the timeliness of Nehemiah and the message of the church providing that example, how through Christ we can be motivated to do amazing things. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. So yeah, bringing that back to the sermon, I mean, Nehemiah was that motivator, and the people said, hey, God's going to strengthen our hands. Let's get after this. And, you know, that sermon was Sunday, and then, or that's where we were in the text Sunday. And to see that happen this week and to be fleshed out was really, really humbling and something to reflect upon, right? To be able to sit back and say, man, isn't it true that God can use literally anybody to do anything for his glory? If like our responsibility in that, and this is kind of the if, is, man, are your hands open to that? Like, is your heart open to that? Are you willing to say, God, I want to be used of you. God, I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact. Because the thing that we say here, and, you know, speaking of Nehemiah building the wall, the purpose was God purposed in his heart. So when we make a difference, when we give, you know, a bottle of water to someone in need, or, you know, food to someone who needs food to eat, whatever the case may be, our purpose is in Jesus' name, right? As the Lord has been kind to us, as the Lord has, you know, given us new life in him, man, we now live a life that says, how can I extend, right, kind of the hands and feet of Christ by the way that I live? And we do so imperfectly, but how can I do this to where I'm making a difference in someone else's life? Well, Nehemiah had that burden on him. And so again, the way the Lord just in his kindness and in his providence lined all of that up is really neat. The point of the sermon in verse 17 was there is a time to rise up. And one of the questions I tried to roll out to our folks is, I wonder what areas of your life you need to rise up in. Like, God is calling you to build something. God is calling you to do something. And I gave a couple of examples, right? And some of those examples could be maybe in your parenting, maybe in your marriage. There's a time to step up. There's a quote that I mentioned in the sermon from Vance Havner, and he said, the vision has to be followed by venture. And he says, it's not enough to stare up the steps. We must step up the steps. And that stuck with me. And one of the things that we tried to encourage our folks in is, hey, look, maybe you even have an idea of where you need to go. Like, you've heard enough sermons, you've read enough Bible, you've read enough books, like, you know what you ought to do, but you're stuck staring at the steps. And it's time to actually step up the steps. So I'm just wondering some of your thoughts about that. Like, when you hear that as, a church member sitting in the pew listening to that, how does that hit you? I know it hits everyone a little differently, but how does that hit you?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. For one, a life moment is certainly marriage. Like, so when I got married, there was kind of an awakening, like, with my faith, with that responsibility to be a husband. But when you're married and married fairly young, you're kind of growing together, and I think I've gained a lot of wisdom since being married. So we've been married for 16 years now, and now with kids, I think that's the other area where it really sticks out as far as stepping up to the calling on my life right now, and I feel like God has put I'd say the burden, or like just made it clear to me that the kids in my house under my care that belong to the Lord, that's my ministry right now, my main ministry. And just what areas do I need to step up as a father and as a husband in that family household? And ironically, we had scheduled out a vacation out west for this week, and I had the time off work, and we had a Airbnb with a mountain view that we had actually been to before, and so the kids were pumped to go on this trip. We don't vacation much, but one thing we like to do is get out, do some hiking, see some fall colors, and this was an opportunity to talk about just what we have to be thankful for, and an opportunity to show the kids the priorities in life. And they were eager to serve when they had serving opportunities, whether they wanted to move some water around or sort food at the church when we started collecting. They knew pretty quickly that there was real people in need. And again, we talked about it as parents. We made it a purposeful decision to talk about, why we weren't doing the trip and what our perspective needed to look like. So I think parenting, is definitely another area. And like I said, just with marriage, making sure that I am the spiritual leader of our household. So again, our kids can see what that looks like. And my wife's family provided that for me, that picture of what a real gospel believing family looked like. And speaking of motivators, like that was a big motivating factor for me as a young husband, like trying to figure out what that looks like. I guess those are the two things that stuck out when you brought to that challenge this Sunday is the, how can I step up in my marriage and then as a father?
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. And I'm really glad to hear that, because, that's the way that it hit me when I was studying, is like, how can I, as a husband, how can I as a parent, how can I as a pastor of this church, like what are some things in my life that I've looked at for a long time, and I've kind of created some vision around, and I know how it ought to be, but I've actually not taken a step up the staircase. And so that's encouraging for me to hear that, man. And I'm really grateful for your leadership as a parent, and being able to disciple, like you're the primary disciple maker in your home, and being able to disciple your kids well to where they understand, hey, Airbnb was going to be amazing, and we know the place, and the view is awesome, and we're going to hike and see the orange and the red and all the beautiful fall colors. But man, there's something that is really tragic that's happening, and so we want to pivot in our thinking, and there's a lot of maturity in that, and it obviously speaks well to your parenting, in saying, hey, like, we want to serve, we want to do all that we can to help those who are in need. So I'm grateful for that. But here's what we know. We learned this from Nehemiah. Nehemiah was just an ordinary man. He's a cupbearer, high responsibility, big job, but wasn't a priest, wasn't a prophet. God purposed in his heart to do something, burdened him. He went to do it. He mobilized people, motivated them. They began to rise up. They linked arms. It says that God strengthened their hands, but almost immediately the naysayers come in. We see that even in the journey to Jerusalem, right? You got Sanballat and Tobias, and they're just like, hey, what are you doing? Did the king clear this with you? What do you think you're going to rebuild this wall? In chapter 4, they're poking so much fun. They're like, man, if a fox crawls up that wall, it's going to fall down. You guys aren't going to be able to actually do anything productive here. Have you found this to be true in your life, Joel, where whenever you do step up, you finally take that step? And it's like, man, I'm going to be the dad God's called me to be. I'm going to be the husband God's called me to be. You take the step up, and almost immediately naysayers come.
Yeah, and another thing that you said on Sunday is just really the struggle that I have in those moments, because the greatest naysayer ends up being myself.
Yeah.
And when I feel stirred up about, an area of my life, whether after a sermon or through worshiping God, the biggest naysayer is definitely myself. And I get in my head a lot. And I struggled through that, even looking back to middle school age, just not being bullied, but being so in my head that I didn't fit into a certain crowd, or whatnot. And I was saved later in life, age of 21. So I didn't really have a faith to fall back on, or to show me, but looking at just the gospel, and through books like Nehemiah, God really does want to be the potter, and we're to be the clay, and just allowing him to mold us and shape us and guide us, and to get out of our own head. And I think having motivators in our life is really helpful. So having a close-knit group of friends that can help you get out of your head. And it's funny, you mentioned running earlier, and I remember in high school going through just some emotional time, as a teenager, doing cross country. I remember a particular cross country coach, that just was kind of a servant leader. It kind of motivated us by doing and being with us, and he'd often run with us. And I remember being just so encouraged and motivated to do good through that relationship. And I wonder if there's an illustration there where we just need to run alongside each other and hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
And when we get in our head and we face the naysayers, that we're so unified as a body of believers that we can just keep each other accountable and remember where we need to put our focus.
Yeah. Man, I love that. And that's essentially what Nehemiah says, right? He's like, the Lord's got us. Like, y'all have no right to even speak into this. And that's a hard thing to do. I know for me and my personality, and you're probably similar, just knowing you some, that, man, you don't want to, like, you want people to be happy with you, right? Like, you don't want to just come across as this person that doesn't care about people, because you do. Mm-hmm. You care about their opinions, their thoughts. Like, it matters to you. But the problem is when that rises above, like, God's opinion, or they're contradictory, right? And it's like, okay, who do you say that I am? Like, Lord, I'm yours. I'm your son. And so who do you say that I am? And I'm similar to you in terms of it's the enemy within that I struggle with the most. I mean, certainly outside influences, it's a real thing. There's people that have opinions and they think you should have or you shouldn't have. And some of it's fair. And then you begin to even listen more deeply to the enemy within, because now you're beating yourself up, right? It's just this vicious cycle. But at the end of the day, you have to remember, man, I'm a child of God and I've been redeemed. I have the Spirit of God within me. And when God's purposed in your heart to do something and those naysayers come, whether it's the naysayer within or whether it's someone else saying, man, Joel, you're never going to be the type of dad you're talking about. You're never going to be able to do this or do, like, whenever those types of things come, we have to be able to lean on the sufficiency of who Christ is in our life, and day to day just realize what the old hymn says, like, I need thee every hour. I need thee. Mm-hmm. And that dependence upon him, I think, is a space God wants us to be in. Nehemiah had to stay in that space of, hey, this doesn't get done without God. And that's why it began with fasting. It began with prayer. And I think for us, any type of move that we make that, we feel like the Lord's prompting us, it begins with, Lord, is this you? God, will you provide? Even not to over spiritualize this, but even with the amount of donations that we've received, it's difficult to get it. I mean, I mentioned earlier, you and I, with a group of other guys, we went to Hendersonville, North Carolina, a place that was impacted by the hurricane and flooding and all of that. And so we made that trip. But when we got back, there was more stuff here than we took. Mm-hmm. And, we have a semi sitting out there now that's fully loaded. We have a 26-foot U-Haul that's fully loaded. There's a pod out there that's fully loaded. There's more stuff that still needs to go. And my prayer has been, God, this started with a case of water. I don't know how to get it there. Will you provide a way? Yeah. And that was a prayer this morning before we even knew there was a pod coming. And someone just called and said, hey, can I drop off a pod? You can fill it up. We'll take it. We'll take it today. Unreal. Like the Lord provides those things, but I think it's that dependence on him, realizing I don't have the means. I don't even know how to do this, but God, you do, and we can trust you. Hey, so real quick, I know we're running low on time. We closed the sermon by talking about how essential joy is, and we extracted that from Nehemiah chapter 8. So the people in Nehemiah's day, once they began to rebuild the wall and they began to see the need for it, and they're charged by the power of God, even in the midst of all the naysayers, like God's remaining with them, and they know that, they feel that. What happens is Ezra begins to read the law, and the people are convicted. They're like, man, why did we wait so long? Like, why did we sit on our hands for so long when this wall needed to be rebuilt? We've suffered derision. We've just sat in that and we've okayed that. We should have done something. And there was like a guilt. I would say even some godly sorrow that's in their hearts. But it's really neat, like how Ezra and Nehemiah respond. They respond by saying, hey, listen, raise your heads, man. Like, the Lord is with you. Look at what God has done. And then in verse 8, there's something that we've seen kind of repeated throughout the Bible, this phrase that says, the joy of the Lord is your strength. So we know life's going to happen. We know there's going to be naysayers. We know that even on a perfect day, walking up the stairs is not easy. You have a vision in your heart, you still got to walk up, and it's not easy. Why do you think it is critical for us to walk in the joy of the Lord when it comes to, hey, if we want to make progress, I'm not going to win the war of attrition every day. I'm not going to have a day that's perfect every day, or probably any day. So joy is essential, but like, what are your thoughts on that? Why is joy essential? Why is that important?
Yeah, I think, I've heard it said that happiness depends on your happenings. So what's around you. And those are things that we can't control. But joy is different. Joy, we see from Scripture, is not dependent on what's happening around us. Yeah, we see that from the Apostle Paul too. Count it all joy. And he is a lot of times writing this from prison. And, in parenting, there's a lot of count it all joy moments, if you will. It's difficult when, you're still struggling with your own sin to deal with a little one's sin nature, and to look at those moments as just grace, opportunities to point a little one who's in their own little world, point them to a big God and a much bigger world. It's difficult from those moments and even moments like with this disaster relief ahead of us. It's difficult to consider the role of being joyful, but I think what we've noticed here at the church and hopefully around the country is joy in serving together and joy in trying to stay united around that, a cause that is much bigger than ourselves, and being others focused will help with that joy. And again, as I'm prayerfully less consumed with myself and my needs, but with the needs of others. And so I think there is some joy through events like we're seeing now, and just so crucial to have that outlook on joy versus happiness, and how often that we get those confused.
Yeah, I love that. I actually love that, man. I've not heard that happiness is tethered to happenings. I think it's well said. So I just want to leave our folks with that thought. Happiness tethered to happenings. Joy is rooted much deeper than that. It's a joy that circumstances can't touch, right? And if we know the joy of the Lord is our strength, then, man, we have to fight for that joy, because there are joy robbers that abound around us. And it can be internal, it could be circumstantial, it could be whatever. But we have to root our joy in the Lord. And we know that, man, when that joy is there, strength is there. When the joy is gone, the strength is gone. And it's just a good reminder. We can't do this on our own. We can't, again, win the war of attrition. We can't just white knuckle our way through life. We need the power and the might of our great King. And the way that we receive that is to walk in the joy that only He can grant. So, Joel, thank you for joining me today, man. Thank you for your service to the Lord, your faithfulness. Thank you for the type of husband you are, the type of dad that you are. Thank you for taking time during your what would be vacation week and going out to West Carolina with us and recording this podcast and serving at the church. You've just been a real gift, brother, and I appreciate you. Hey, Faith family, thanks for listening. Hope you have an incredible week. We'll see you soon. God bless.